With Mario RPG being released on November 17th, 2023, and its impact on generational gaming, and recently finishing and playing Paper Mario on the Nintendo Virtual Console, I felt I owe it to the gaming world that I talk about this masterpiece of a video game. Let's look at why Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, matters. The premise of why this matters series is to look at a video game and its cultural history with gaming as a whole. This is done by analyzing a game from a retro perspective and asking deeper questions about why it aided into the future of gaming as of this day. We do this by analyzing it and looking at it compared to games at the time versus games now, and just get a general idea of what makes it great. When you see top tier list of NES games or top tier list of games in whole, Mario RPG tends to be top 5, top 10 for most players if they've given this game a try. So today we're going to jump right into the wonderful, quirky, and playful Super Mario JRPG, Super Mario RPG. So grab your Jinx belt, your favorite Geno plush, and wish with me as we save the Mushroom Kingdom from Smithy and his band of man-made weapons. Spoiler warning for Mario RPG, light spoiler warning for Final Fantasy series and Chrono Trigger. And if you like the content, subscribe, let me know in the comments below what you think. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars was a collaborative effort between Nintendo and Square Enix, formerly known as Square. The game was developed by Square and published by Nintendo. Released for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES, in 1996, it marked a unique collaboration between two prominent gaming companies. Nintendo provided the beloved Mario characters and universe, while Square brought its experience in role-playing game RPG development, resulting in a game that blended the iconic Mario elements with RPG mechanics. The collaboration between Nintendo and Square Enix played a significant role in shaping the distinctive qualities that made Super Mario RPG a standout title in the Mario series. This was at the time where Square Enix was making some of the most iconic RPGs to this date. Games like Front Mission, Final Fantasy series, Chrono Trigger, just to name a few. These games, for most Americans, were their first introduction to the heavy narrative gameplay of turn-based combat. Mario RPG was a different breed of RPG, however, because it was one of the first Nintendo titles that Nintendo comfortably gave their IPs to another developer to make a unique experience. Nowadays, we don't see that. People are so protective about their IPs. As you plug in the cartridge, the stage is set in the Mushroom Kingdom, where the princess is being taken by Bowser by the millionth time. And it's up to Mario to save the day again. You learn the basics of gameplay while having two very distinct elements: an overworld that's interactive, and the classic RPG battle system. With the overworld areas, these play more like your traditional platformer, but in a 3D environment, and for the Super Nintendo at the time, it was being pushed graphically, so that's why the graphics look a little pixelated. But it's part of the charm. The 3D style of this game could be considered something as a pre-rendering to the 64 graphics. Looking at Donkey Kong 64 or Spyro, for example, where you have open worlds or open zones to explore, find power-ups. In these environments, you do what a Mario game does best: be Jumpman. You have zones that are free exploration to the player, ranging from towns, temples, underground, caves, oceans, even a factory, and many, many more areas with monsters, breakable boxes, items and power-ups to collect. This style of roaming around feels more like your traditional platformer game, as you're rewarded to explore and jump around solving puzzles and learning more about the world and its inhabitants. This exploration world-like environment was very reminiscent to the players to ease into RPG elements. Previous RPGs in the past were more grid-based, more locked animations, more just press up, you move up, press left, and were hard to visually enjoy. With Mario RPG, environments stood out, making them unique, giving players a variance that made this world feel alive. It added to the mesh of gameplay that let players feel like Mario itself in this more in-depth world. That was how gameplay is until you bumped into an enemy. gameplay taking place in these small arenas with players taking turns to beat whatever Mario is facing. You have your classic Mario abilities such as hammers, jumping, even the iconic Fire Flower for massive damage. Also introduced into this game for the first time were battle actions, where you have the ability to do more in battle than press the attack and allow your team character to just do damage. You could perform action commands. Unlike traditional RPGs at the time, it was press an action, do a thing, use your skill, it does a thing. But this game gave players more ability to master their gameplay with rewarding of timing attacks, which is explained by Toad at the beginning of the game. It's even cool because of these animations for each different item or ability or attack looks slightly variant. For example, Bowser's Mario Toss, which is probably the funniest move in the game because he's literally throwing Mario. If you got incredibly skilled at this game, you could kill every boss with just timing your jumps with a super jump, one of Mario's abilities. Speedrunners use this mechanic to OTK bosses with one try by just mastering a 2-frame window to beat everything. It's pretty awesome. Watch some speedruns of this, it's great.
Alright, so coming up we are going to be doing super jumps for the first time, and this is like super serious, it's very important. Yeah, there it is.
In addition to playing as Mario, you, during your travels, had the opportunity of meeting new and old friends for this RPG-style team that you build along the way. You have Mario, the main character. He's your silent protagonist from all RPGs at the time. Kind of a jack of all trades. He's a roundabout character. Mallow, the first friend you meet, is a cloud person, but he's a frog prince that controls elements very similar to RPG Red Mage. Healing, utility, does damage, AoE, offers your first healing ability in the game. Next character you meet is Geno, a Star Warrior that was given life from a doll from the very last Wish on Star Road. He's your traditional Black Mage. He's or last cannon of the party. His spells are amazing, and his damage output's great, but he's a little on the squishy side. This game also introduced Bowser as a playable character. He was the bulky tank that controlled the Koopa Troopas. He temporarily allows Mario to join the Koopa Troopas so he can reclaim his castle. He's your traditional main physical DPS / tank of the party, with a little bit of utility in the theme of status effects. And you have Princess Toadstool, another off-the-wall playable character, aka Peach, and she's literally the team's white mage. She has the best healing magic, and that's what she does best. With a cast like this, you have your primary classes covered for your normal JRPG experience. Silent protagonist, elemental caster, kind of companion buddy, black mage, high spell damage, low physical, you have your tank / physical damage guy, and you have your healer. You have the entire cast to make a RPG with just that alone. Fun fact, in the 90s, if you didn't buy the game for this game, you didn't know Peach was a playable character because it wasn't promoted, unlike Bowser, which was shown some promotional gear. This was the first time where you could actively play him as a character, and for kids or video games at the time, that was a really big deal. you would learn about this as you went to school, and they would talk to you like, hey, did you get a chance to get Peach? Let me know in the comments below if that's something that you remember. With this team of players and the style of gameplay, introduced a generation of Westerners to RPGs that may have not been up to the task of venturing out into the world of story-driven narratives. At the time, the coolest RPG that came out in the 90s that someone might have touched by accident by renting in a Blockbuster or something was possibly Final Fantasy VI for the Super Nintendo, as graphically it looked alright. Story was very, very plot-driven and kind of confusing. At the time, 3D generational games was being a bit more encouraged and pushed, so RPGs weren't really mainstream just yet. RPG games were more known for their depth and narrative, but gameplay was lacking with how little interactive it was. Honestly, kind of boring, especially if you're like 10. Don't get me wrong, these types of games can be incredibly fun. Lufia, Final Fantasy VI, or Chrono Trigger are amazing games, but at the time the world was just being introduced to something that deeply in depth that to allow a player to enjoy a video game that was not as action focused. And Mario RPG allowed people to have their cake and eat it too. The platforming and the overworld let players run around freely, dodging enemies if they didn't want to encounter. It makes me think of those bees from area right before Mallow's homeworld, but yet you can still harness the challenge of the classic RPG elements that a new player to this style of gameplay would be possibly enjoyed to get into. This was also aided that the plot was not very hard to digest, unlike the stories of RPGs at the time. Plot for Mario RPG. Princess is taken by Bowser. Mario goes saves the princess. Mario beats Bowser and Big, and as you are about to save the day, Big stronger guy in the same castle is beating up everybody. Now Mario must go from square one back to the castle to save the princess, quote unquote, but as he's doing that, he's learning more that this threat is not just affecting Bowser or the castle, it's taking over their attempt to take over the entire world, and using this misfit team of adventurers, they gotta stop it. Now Mario must travel around learning that he and the new assortment of enemies popping up in the world are not from Bowser, something more menacing than Bowser could ever be. To the point for a story. Good guy and friend saves the world from bad guy trying to dominate everything. Overall, Mario RPG opened the door on what a RPG game could be. More action-focused overworld and more intriguing gameplay, action commands, that allowed players to play what they felt like a traditional Mario game with all its glorious jumping and running around, but with RPG twists that allow players to play that style of gameplay that they may have never touched, being introduced to the Japanese famous RPG. This led the way for when Final Fantasy VII came out in 1997. People were kind of already primed of what an RPG could be expected, and so Final Fantasy VII being the next, quote, big one, end quote. I think Mario RPG set the pace for what a video game could be for a story narrative and a silent protagonist. And when Final Fantasy VII came out, offering the opportunity to play a RPG style game and a complex plot with a lot of reading, players were comfortable in venturing into that because they went from simple understanding good guy beats bad guy into a world with Mako energy and swords, crazy looking 3D bosses, and the 3D environments also helped. That allowed players to play a style of game they may have never touched, or until Final Fantasy VII was released, but that's a different story. I like to think Mario RPG set the pace or paved the way on how popular that game is for gaming as a whole, because RPGs didn't really resonate with people until Final Fantasy VII became released. So that's why Mario RPG matters. It paved the way for RPGs as a whole, and without it, who knows what we would have. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with my opinions on this? Do you think RPGs were already relevant at the time of the mid-90s or so? If you like the content, subscribe, and I appreciate you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.